No, I mean, we were born right here in America, and we're Muslim. He said, "How are you Muslim? How is this possible?" He began asking us a series of questions. He asked, "Do you know the prayer? Do you know how to pray? Do you know this? Assalamu alaikum. Do you know how to say this?" So I'm trying not to get offended. Me and my friend were sitting there, and I told him, I said, "Yeah, we not only know how to say Assalamu alaikum and Alhamdulillah and all of the above, but my friend here, he's one of my students. He's Hafiz of Quran, and I myself, I'm an imam of a community, and there's more of us at the community that you need to come and visit. So something I began this, I think it took about 10 minutes to begin breaking down our history, giving him
reconcile the whole idea of being a Muslim and being an entertainer. The entertainment world is a peculiar world because in entertainment, if you want something, it's always going to be, what are you willing to give me for it? So it's always been quid pro quo, what are you willing to give me for it? If you want to be on this show, what are you willing to give me to be on this show? If you want to perform in this club, what are you willing to perform? And it was interesting that was my, if you will, interest into entertainment. Now, there's two things I want everybody to understand. Before I was Muslim, this aspect of Muslim entertainment, if you will, I was a socially conscious comedian. So some of the questions about race and identity, particularly religion, actually led me to being Muslim. So as a comedian, I had a lot of questions. Islam was that, at that space, Islam was a question, and it allowed me, in some regards, to hold on to my comedy identity. But at the same time, the problem becomes, how do you expand it? How do you make this thing bigger? So I'm going to tell you a little story, and I'm going to try and be short. So we're going to go with the principle of the three B's, which is be brief, brother. You know that. On a fluke, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm a young comedian, and I stopped at a club on the way back. I wanted to do a guest set at this club. I was working on some new material. Ironically, I'm sitting there at the bar. I was at the bar. I wasn't drinking, but I was at the bar, me and my cider, and I'm working on materials. And I hear a joke from the stage. I'm not listening to the comedians on the stage. I'm really into my own thing. And I hear this comedian tell this joke. Now keep in mind, I'm a young comic. I hear this comedian tell this joke in my 20s. And the joke, I can't get his voice correctly, but the joke goes, man, I tell you, times are getting so bad in my neighborhood, the drug dealers had to lay off the police. And I looked up and I'm like, who does jokes like that anymore? And I look up and I see a black man with a bush. He had his shirt, his collar of the shirt all the way out to his shoulders. And after he told the joke, he did like this, did a tap dance, and bam, I'm like, oh my God, it's Nipsey Russell. I'm like, Nipsey Russell is in this place? And I call all the comedians I know, all the black ones, yo, get down to the club, Nipsey Russell is here. And they're like, Nipsey who? Huh? What? Nipsey Russell. They had no idea who Nipsey Russell was. I am disparaged. And I'm like, I'm looking at history on the stage. Nipsey Russell is working probably this club because it's the downside of his career, but he's here, right? I walk up to Mr. Russell. I said, Mr. Russell, my name is Preacher Moss. I'm a young comedian. I said, I appreciate everything you've done for young black comedians. I said, I tried to get brothers down here. They didn't come. I said, but you're in Milwaukee. You're my guest. Whatever you need, let me know. And he was blessed enough, generous enough to let me hang out for the whole day. I took him to dinner. I took him to lunch. I went back to the club. So we were at his hotel, and I was like, Mr. Russell, can you excuse me, Mr. Nipsey, can you excuse me a minute? He said, what's on? I said, I got to pray. He goes, I only got to pray. I said, I got to pray. Then it gets worse. Like, I got to wash up and pray. He's like, what's going on? And I go, Mr. Russell, I'm a comedian, but I'm Muslim. And he goes, I know. He goes, do you think you're just hanging out with me just because? He says, I know. And I said, turn the mic down a little. I'm sorry. Oh, here? This one. I'll turn it down.
There's no turn down.
I'll just move back a little bit. Oh, don't worry about it. I'll just move back. I'm excited, everybody. So I'm sitting with Mr. Nipsey Russell after I think so loud. And he starts telling me about all the Muslims who were in the entertainment business. He said they had their Muslim names, but they had their entertainment names. Art Blakey, stuff like that. A lot of jazz musicians. He started telling me about how the jazz musicians really changed the trajectory of African American expression, art, music, particularly in political activism. Because before that, you didn't really have this thing that came together. And he gave me this long dissertation on the great comedian Burt Williams. Now, if you don't know Burt Williams was a star in the silent film era. The importance of Burt Williams in the silent film era is not that he did silent films. It's that this was a guy who was West Indian, who had a connection to Marcus Garvey and that movement. And you know Marcus Garvey had a connection to Muslims. But he begins to bring out this whole thing about black people need to be producing their own art. You need to be producing your own plays, stage plays, screenplays. And he becomes this push for that. And I asked Nipsey Russell, I said, what was the significance of Malcolm X? He goes, well, first you gotta ask me the significance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Fair enough. What he said was, he said, you won't understand that you're young and you're stupid. I said, yes, I am. Thanks, sir. He said, you have to understand that under the aspect of culture, environment, and politics that doesn't lend anything to African American equality, liberty, anything, he said, you had a religion that all of a sudden gives you an offshoot. So that when you credit something, particularly in Islam, you say Allah, but we're not talking about the Allah where we can go to Allah's higher thing. It is the word that changes this persona of these people. And he says, in the arts entertainment business, it began to spread this articulate type of activism that haven't been seen before. And so it sets in regards many wheels in motion. Jazz musicians were because the Ahmadiyya movement comes maybe in the 20s to Philadelphia, and eventually goes to Chicago. But in Philadelphia, particularly with women, it resonates to a different, because women were dealing with two things. White supremacy, also dealing with patriarchal society. So they're dealing with two things. But they take this religion and they create a community bubble, if you will, whereby they said, we're going to raise our families not the way the government tells us to raise. We're not asking for handouts. We are looking to build families. And in that space, they're like, we're looking to build men to help out build our families. This is what's going on in the 20s. Ironically, the jazz movement moves from New Orleans to the cities. So it moves from Jelly Roll Morton, Satchmo, Louisiana stroll music. It comes up north and it creates a different type of environment. The environment it creates is that it becomes commingled, if you will, with Islam as, let me say this very carefully, Islam as a liberating force. Islam is a liberating force. You are not paying a subscription. You're not putting anything down on it, as we say. This is not a recurring thing. This is, you take your shahada in this space, but not even a shahada back then in many cases. But you accept that above everything else, Allah is somehow giving you positive direction in your life. And so the music begins to reflect that. And the people who play the music began to reflect that. And the biggest thing about Islam is that it gives brothers a passport, because the music that they played so well allows them to go overseas. It allows them to go play in places like Paris and Germany and the UK, whereby the constriction of being black in America, they see that as a plus. They've heard about it, they've read about it, but they've never seen it up close. And then what happens is, you put Islam in the mix, now you have a guiding force that says we have, in very basic terms, we have this religious curriculum that's now guiding us. So let me expand a little bit more. My mentor in comedy, who probably saved my comedy career when I was 22, is Mr. Dick Gregory. On a very, very bad weekend in Chicago, I got fired twice on the same weekend. It was the Def Jam era. I was trying to be a clean comedian. I can't follow 8 comedians that just curse the whole time, and I'm trying to be socially conscious. It's a recipe for disaster. I got fired. They said, come back tomorrow, we'll try. I got fired again. I'm like, I'm never going back again. I don't like Chicago to this day just because. But I was about to quit comedy, and I told my mother. My mother said, this is foolish. You're good. I think you're good. I'm like, that's just because you're my mom. And my mother said, well, why don't you talk to this man? Because he did social comedy, social commentary, and he was an activist, and da-da-da-da. And people you should know I was an activist in college. So from 17 up to now, I protested apartheid, Palestine, police brutality. This is when I was 16, 17 years old. I literally had to grow into my activism because I looked like a baby. But she said, call this man. And I called Mr. Dick Gregory. And this is the thing that allowed me to probably have this speech today. I called him, his wife picked up the phone. I told her who I was, which didn't matter. She knew who I was anyway. I said, I'm about to quit comedy. She said, hold on a minute. And she got Mr. Dick Gregory. And I I'm pouring out my heart to him, you know, because one of the things that really, really worried me was I treat Islam as it was taught to me. I treat Islam as a plan A religion. A plan A religion, which means that I don't have a plan B. It systemically has to work. You know what I'm saying? If it doesn't work, if it doesn't work well, it better work somehow. So Mr. Gregory has Conversations with him. That's number one. Number two, the conversation I had with him, he did all the talking. So I had this idea based upon the fact that factually, the brand of African American Islam in the country was very framed in terms of being protest religion. We use this religion to move culture. We use it to build our schools when we had inferior schools. We built our businesses when nobody wanted to give us housing and loans. This is the provocation of the religion. And I thought somehow in this entertainment piece that I could contribute something. And so I came up with this title called Allah Made Me Funny. And it was funny when I said it to my brother, he's a Pakistani brother, Hazrat Usman. The first words were like, we should change the name. I said, change the name of what? He goes, don't call it Allah Made Me Funny, call it God Made Me Funny. I'm like, oh, man, I just left Christianity 15 minutes ago. If I was going to just call it God, I'd have stayed there. And I said, no, we're going to call it Allah Made Me Funny. He said, why? I said, because even if people hate the tour, they got to say Allah's name. So now, we're in this whole idea of comedy, but we're talking about strategic planning. So this critical mass with Imam Wahid Muhammad comes from the fact that I wanted to do the tour, I wanted to make sure the community was involved, so I run it up the flagpole, he comes back, it's a good idea, do it. But I see him in Chicago. It's a funny story. It may not be funny to you. I see him in Chicago and I wanted to give him Allah Made Me Funny DVD, our first one. And he was walking up there and he was with his security. And I just walked past security and the guy was like, hey, whoa. And I'm like, dude. He's like, you can't walk up on him, man. I'm like, what could you do? You're 15. Yeah. And I laughed at the man. I'm saying, ma'am, I love you, but I think you have the oldest security in the history of this land. I said, the average age is like 78. I said, he can't do anything to me. So I said, if I try to attack you, all he could do was admonish me. Hey, you know better than that. So the man said, I'll laugh about that later. I said, ma'am, I want to thank you for giving me your blessing to do this tour. He said, I didn't give you a blessing, I gave you a mission. And I'm like, well, I thought it was a blessing. And he said, let me tell you something about leadership. Now, I'm listening. He said, leadership is built out of experience. You're going to learn that in some places you're going to win, but you're going to learn in some places you have to learn how to lose and be happy about it. He said, the goal of this thing, this Allah Made Me Funny thing, he says, yes, I want you to do it. He said, but with a caveat. He said, do not start it specifically in the African American community. He said, you're being redundant. He said, we know what Islam can do for us in situation. He said, you need to go to these spots, and his whole idea was, we talked about this weekend, back in 2004, he's like, we can't get our imams on the minbars on some of our communities, some of our brothers and sisters, quote unquote, in the immigrant Muslim community. We can't get on the minbars. Nobody wants to hear about how Islam works for us in the context of this is what we do here in America. He said, and it's a different language. And I'm like, I'm being a comedian now. I'm being selfish. Here's all my nuts right here. I said, hey man, what you're trying to say
sir, which is quite peculiar. What you're trying to say to me is go over here and do comedy over here. He goes, yes. I said, hey, man, you're basically saying I got to start over. And he goes, well, are you funny or not? And then he said something that really, really resonated with me to this day. He goes, listen, don't take it wrong. And whenever elder tells you don't take it wrong, you're going to take it wrong. He goes, your job is not to be a master comedian. Your job is to learn how to be a master teacher. Then I realized he had done the homework for me. A lot of y'all know I was a public school teacher for 11 years. I taught severely emotional disturbed children, potentially the hard. And I realized that he thought I was uniquely involved.
He says, here's the justification for you to be doing this as a Muslim. And I'm going to move forward after this as soon as I can. He mentioned Muqasid al-Sharia, the qualifications or the purposes of Sharia, and it was really protection. It was protection against oppression. And he said, if you're not going to do this, understanding that we have to protect our own, but also we have to protect people that don't even know they have to be protected. He goes, there's no need for you to do it. At that point, we were done. We were over. And what happened after that? A couple things happened after that. But I want to mention two things that happened after that. I learned, that the history of Islam in terms of African American narrative and entertainment, it needs to be shouted from the mountaintop. That people don't understand a specific type of excellence that has come out of this if we don't say this is who we are. That's number one. Number two is we have to separate. No longer can we say that we're like everybody else. We are not like everybody else. Nipsey Russell said, y'all are not like everybody else. And what I mean is the blessing, the courage, but the tenacity to be Muslim and still remain humble and still be beautiful towards one another. That was the thing. So when we got to Muslim comedy, the interesting thing was it begins to permeate into other things. All praises to Allah, it starts taking me other places. I never wanted to be a comedian, just so you guys know. I wanted to be a jazz musician. Allah knows best, right? But when I would meet with jazz musicians, we had this kinship. And I began to realize how many Muslims play jazz music. I don't want to say jazz music, I want to say freedom music, spiritual music. When I decided to become Muslim, I'll be honest, I think I listened to John Coltrane's Love Supreme about 20 times. To hear him say, Allah Supreme. And let me give you a little backstory. The song or the album Love Supreme was not supposed to be Love Supreme. Did you know that? No. When he produced the album was originally named, wait for it, Allah Supreme. Right. But you had a lot of Jewish music executives like, oh, hell no, we're going to put that in. But if you listen to Love Supreme and you hear the chants, it goes, Love Supreme, I love Supreme, I love Supreme. And then it goes, Allah Supreme, Allah Supreme, Allah Supreme. So you begin to understand that this is a very special working. Now, the interesting thing is, moving forward, I begin to understand that the influence, I talked about the engagement, let's talk about the expression of Islam in the arts. The expression of Islam in the arts is interesting because we leave DNA, but we don't leave our names. We put in the work, but we don't say built by. Even more, even the genres of hip-hop music. Do you realize hip-hop music, as bad as we may say it is today, it would be totally off the rails, if you didn't have a number of some of the leading hip-hop guys who what? Have a relationship to Islam. I've said this before. If one of the top rap guys, Jay-Z or whoever, decided to say Islam is garbage to a good beat, we're through. We're literally through. But you're talking about generations who've come up through a music tradition that has been buoyed and framed by Islam. You know, Imam, he's not here, but Imam was here. It's funny. So remember when we were at Masjid al-Islam, it was a church. I'm sitting in church, brothers, you know, that church, in the masjid, and I'm new to Houston, and the brother hit me in the back, like, you know, hey, man, you know what I mean? I'm trying to scoot up, accidentally kicked me. I turn around again. It's Scarface. Scarface from the Ghetto Boys. And I'm sitting here like, I really don't know how to address this one. I know I got to give him salams at the end of the thing. Like, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Scarface. Not understanding that this gentleman received his shahada from Imam Wazir Ali. He told me his name was Brad. I was like, I know Brad. Well, what you have now is a bit of a renaissance. The music game, the TV game, have tried for years to figure out how to capitulate to Muslims what your image looks like. Has tried for years to frame your value and get you to pay for it. I'll tell this story, it's a beautiful story, and I want everybody to listen carefully. At the height of Islamophobia, when it was really, really nuts, I ran across a guy on a black advertising website. I was researching for an ad I was trying to pitch for Gatorade. And the name of the website was Kiss My Black Ads. And there was a guy who was eviscerating Gatorade because they were putting up bottles of red and blue Gatorade in South Central LA, Bloods and Crips. And this guy I'm like, this dude is crazy. And I'm like, maybe it's just a pseudonym, Harry Weber. And Harry Weber turned out to be a real person. And I asked him, I said, would you mentor me? And let me give you who Harry Weber was. He was the first artistic director of Motown. First artistic director of Motown. You know, you've seen his act before. My baloney has a first name. I'm stuck on Band-Aid. His Band-Aid stuck on me. Before quality is job one. United Negro College Fund. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. He's a genius level dude. I got a hold of him. I was like, you know, he said he wanted to mentor me. He said, come out to California and I'll tell you everything I'll tell you. Just buy me lunch. Deal. Flew out to California, was sitting at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles on Sunset Gower. We're eating. He said, why am I here? I said, hey, the reason you're here, this is how stupid I am as a young man. I said, sir, the reason you're here is, my name is Preacher Moss. He goes, what do you want, Preacher Moss? I said, I want to change the image of Muslims in America. He looks at me and goes, you can't. I'm upset. What do you mean? I'm really upset because I'm paying for this chicken, right? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you can't. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, let me help you out. See, do you know how much money has gone into the image of Muslims that you see on TV? The image of Muslims on Hulu, Netflix, the image of Muslims in films. And I said, no. He said, let me help you out. He goes, Pepsi-Cola spends $1 billion on Pepsi-Cola ads. He goes, how much money do Muslims put into their image? So now I'm feeling really stupid. But he gives me this thing, which is a gem. It's a gem. He says, you're a journalism guy, write a header for a press release. He says, write a header for a press release. And I take my pen, proudly, arrogantly, and I write, Muslim comedian sets out to change image of Muslims in America. And he takes it, and he looks at it, he goes, you're an idiot. And he takes a pen and he scratches it. And then he writes what he writes. He goes, now read it. And it says, Muslim comedian sets out to raise $100 million to change the image of Muslims in America. I'm like, okay, you got me. I said, where did you learn that from? You know what he said? He said, I watched the Nation of Islam. He said, I watched Malcolm and build, whenever they wanted to build something, they put a price tag on it. He said, Muslims, they start putting price tags on their entertainment. He said, so when that happens, everyone else puts price tags on it. He says, if you value it, Preacher Moss, you idiot, put a price tag on it. And what happens from that space on is everything you see, we put a price tag on it. So the idea of Muslim entertainment is a unique brand that emanates from the African American Muslim experience. The only thing we've done in the last couple of years in this particular narrative is that we put a price tag on it. There is a barrier of entry. When he said $100 million, guess what? 95% of the people that would give you a hard time, some of them from your own community, don't want to have a conversation because in their mind, I ain't got $100 million. Right. They're not part of that conversation. But he also said the other thing is there may be, and this is the thing I've learned about Muslim entertainment and the narrative about Muslim entertainment, which is why I fight so hard till now these days, because people are beginning to give our stuff away and there's no price tag to it. He said, Preacher Mars, there may be a person out in the world that can write you a check for $100 million. He said, however, the mystery, the challenge, the threat that you could get $100 million is worth $100 million because it causes people to lose sleep. That eventually, without $100 million, you could win. Question. If you could put a price on the African American experience of Islam in America, how much would it be worth? If you can line item, talk about everything that happened, right? Final Call, Muhammad Speaks, Ahmadiyya, da-da-da. We keep
Temples
going.
in every city.
How much would it be worth?
And everywhere, businesses.
I'm only saying this to understand or share with you that I have to understand that we built institutions. They're institutions that can never be duplicated. They can never be duplicated. Folks will never understand the primary essence of how we got here. So I don't want to go too long, brothers and sisters. Let me say this, and I'm gonna let everybody go. We'll take a couple questions. Think about the expression, the engagement, and the value. Putting a price tag on this expression, you know, can't do it. The conversation I had with Imam Warwick Muhammad may have lasted a combined 17 minutes, but that was 17 minutes in 2004. Look where we are now. His dream is where we are now. That we're invited to these nice places. We're on the minbars. I didn't realize until 3 years ago that he had me go out into these communities because I wasn't speaking to the parents that came to the shows, the parents who were from Pakistan and India. I was talking to their children. That the language is valuable. And as we began to again, look at this situation, evaluate the situation, assess the situation, we should be, in regards, in nature, the people from 1920 who had nothing, who didn't have $100 million. They didn't have $100. But they had the expression, they had the inspiration, and they had the execution. You know. Mr. Weber said something to me. He said, don't take it wrong. He said, Preacher Miles, I love black people. I'm black. I love black people. He said, the problem with us, though, he said, we're great at making moves, horrible at making decisions. The difference, again, in the value is that we decide to make a decision. We decide to move forward. So I'm going to close. If you have any questions, let's take a couple minutes. That's my piece on the full narrative of black Muslims in entertainment. Questions? Man.
I mean, yeah, where did Preacher Miles go?
You want to go there? Yeah, no. Well, Allah knows best. I'm just going to say, my mom was one of those, once you got to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you had to go to church. I had a very limited attention span and a very skewed way of looking at things. The reverend at our church, Reverend John Johnson III, nice guy. He's a preacher. He was a horrible public speaker. And I didn't think you could do both. You just can't be a preacher and a horrible public speaker. You know what I'm saying? And he would give these really painful sermons every Sunday. And I had a limited attention span. And I used to pass time away, I used to do imitations of him, giving bad service. And so I had a character called Reverend Spitty Mountain, who would do the thing, and the Lord said, you know, you're only working, I'm 7 years old, come on here. I'm like, the Lord said, you know. And I, in Sunday school, I used to get paid 25 cents to do the impression. So I got caught by one of the sisters, and I thought I was going to get killed. And she paid me $1. I'm like, there might be a future in this thing. So I went from that kid, Reverend Spitty Mouth, to that annoying kid preaching. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What's your opinion on, in reference to the comedian, Cat Williams? Just, whoa.
Cat Williams? It's funny because they asked Cat, were you part of the Nation of Islam? And he goes, yes. Look, here's what Cat really said in a nice way. For all of the people that he talked about, it is pretty genius the way he said it. He basically said, all these guys, your Steve Harvey, Ricky Smiley, he says, they're not leaders. They're never going to be leaders of culture. We are never going to follow them. You know why? Because they follow the dollar. When he spoke about Kevin Hart, I was like, ooh. And the only reason was, I was like, now that's the truth a lot of people don't understand. I worked with Kevin Hart at a school called Stetson University. We're performing out of college. And it's Daytona Beach. And he was just getting married, engaged, whatever. And he was like, would you mind if I go first? I'm trying to get out of here. I'm like, that's cool. We both had the same college agent. And in talking, he was going out to LA. And I'm like, well, man, I'm out in LA. If you need anything, let's stay connected, because he was a Philly guy. And he goes, no, man, he goes, I got a deal. Now, for any comedian, the word, I got a deal, he was like, really? He said, I got a deal. And I'm like, really? And he goes, but it's only for 4 shows. There's a show called Big Mama's House. And they were going to do 4 episodes and cancel it. He goes, I'm only doing this to get to the next deal. That deal was for a movie called Soul Plane. And every comedian in LA was like, who is this little dude running around in Soul Plane? And the way he had the deal, that's not the way they do business in Hollywood. So when Cat Williams said he was playing, yeah, we don't do business like that. You don't show up with deals. And that became the new standard. So when he was talking about other people and the weirdness, if you will, that you're in Hollywood, that's part of it. Yeah. And he didn't lie. You know, and the reason you can tell Cat really didn't lie, and some stuff I was like, you know, it was a 3-hour interview. You're gonna have to close. You can't give people 100% truth and they lose their mind. And throw some lies in it so they feel better about themselves. But, you know, there's certain things that he spoke about, and they're very true in Hollywood. You know, I had a show that I really, really promoted. I wrote it, and I was very happy about it. A Muslim sitcom, African-American characters. I mean, you guys have seen Mo on Netflix and Rami on Hulu. This precedes that by over 10 years. And I finally got somebody to read it. You know what they told me? This is a great script, but where's the gay character? Well, you might as well go and give me the script back. And the reason I'm saying you might as well give it back, because I know in this room, just people in this room, if I put out something like that and I showed up, y'all have me hand up in the corner like, boy, what's wrong with you? I might get attacked because you know better. And more importantly, you represented a tradition. We don't do that. And we're a religion, a community that's, even in entertainment, very high on accountability. It's not about watch what you say or how what you say. It's like, how are you expressing yourself? You know, and I'll wrap up here. And I want to give a shout out to all the imams. There are a lot of imams here who have helped shepherd me through a lot of stuff in terms of entertainment, but also this space of activism. We have Bashir Jones, who's, you know, first city councilman out of Cleveland. But also an incredible rapper and spoken word artist. You know, to see him in his campaign talking to the youth in that language is unique. You know, you're not going to see Joe Biden rapping to anybody. Because he forget all the lyrics. All right, I'm done, everybody. That's what I like.
Imam Wazir has an announcement. There's a restaurant down there. They have a buffet if anyone would like to get lunch.